Chapter 6. The Susquehanna Seal. The Susquehanna River is a summertime paradise, away from the chaos of the big city of New York. Abundant in resources, the Oyster River begins in Otsego Lake in Cooperstown and flows all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay. The water played an important role in the discovery of the state of Pennsylvania. But what's lurking below the surface might be even more interesting. According to Indian legend and later confirmed by discoveries during excavations in the 1900s, there were once giants who roamed these lands, and some had horns. But the legend doesn't stop at bones. There have been many recent sightings of mysterious creatures along one of the oldest rivers in the world. The Wendigo suffers from starvation, no matter how much meat it consumes. Some would say it's a mercy to kill one because living with the Wendigo appetite is worse than dancing with the devil himself, and his tune will never end. In Celtic mythology, Selkie folks are seals that can become human. In Scotland, the seals shed their skin and become beautiful humans. The seal skin holds magical abilities to shapeshift. Without the skin, the being is unable to transform. There are many stories of human and Selkie encounters. One man was drowning and doomed when his wife turned back into a seal and thankfully rescued him. Other men tried stealing the seal skins for themselves, only furthering the distance between the two races. Many witnesses compare the Susquehanna seal to a feared cryptid down under, the bunyip. Bunyip translates to devil and evil spirit. The water-dwelling monster lurks in swamps, billabongs, rivers, and waterholes. The creature is known for hunting humans and large animals. They love the taste of children, women, and foreigners. They are said to have tusks, feathers, claws, scales, horns, and supernatural powers. Aboriginal tribes avoided riverbanks and night walks. There are many children's books and at least 9 different tribal variations of this mythical creature. Newspapers reported that the bunyip had a head of a crocodile, dark fur, and the tail of a horse. Other witnesses claim the tail is serrated, like the tail of a stingray. They have flippers and evil, conniving eyes. Some tribes describe an aggressive one-eyed creature with a mouth on its stomach. There have been bones and skeletons found deep in caves that led to multiple declarations of the bunyip being an undiscovered, living, breathing animal. Sightings to this day are still piling up in the Baggy Greens. When I was 12, my family visited Cooperstown for the Dreams Park baseball tournament. We were one of the best teams in the state of Ohio, and we were invited to play in the famous international bracket. I was excited to see the Hall of Fame and compete against some of the best in the world. I'd heard many stories over the years about the park, so I was itching the entire 6-hour drive from Cleveland. Dreams Park has a chapter of its own in my Haunted Camps and Campuses book, but this one focuses on our day away from the baseball fields. My family picked me up from the park for a day on the river. We visited the Zories, who were staying at an awesome riverfront rental. There were water slides and trampolines, so basically we were in childhood heaven. I was more trying to fish than get in the water, but I wasn't going to be the only one dry. I was hesitant jumping in the dark water because I knew that there could be something lurking below. I knew large snakes and giant catfish were not far from my dangling legs. Plus, we had heard from lifeguards that there were bull sharks in the Otsego Lake, and that flowed right down into these waters. I kept my eyes open for fins or anything else that looked out of place. As time went by, I grew a little more comfortable in the murky waters. I knew the monsters were near, but they must have been used to coexisting with humans in these stretches. We wrestled on the trampoline and threw each other off the side of the slide. Then we started jumping off the high slide and catching the football diving into the water. After a couple of throws, I climbed up for my time to play receiver. I climbed up the side of the slide and rubbed my eyes to help see better without my glasses. As the shadows cleared, I saw something swimming towards the bank in the distance. It looked like a beaver. I smiled and tried to get a better look. By that time, the younger Zories were growing impatient and yelling for me to hurry up. I noticed that the beaver was just the creature's head, and it started to rise out of the water. I really wish I'd had my glasses, but I could tell this thing was big. I wondered if it was a diver, but I couldn't see a snorkel. I heard the guys calling, but I ignored them. Then smack, the football drilled me in the side of the head. I fell into the water with my ear bleeding and ringing, concussed. Next thing I knew, I was being pulled out of the river and all the parents were surrounding me. First thing I asked when I came back to life was, "Did you see that thing?" They had no clue what I was talking about, and just thought it was the head trauma speaking. My mom put my glasses on me and I rushed back to the river. I pointed towards the bank and said, "I saw something right there." Alex believed me. He could tell I'd been distracted by something on the top of the slide. He knew I wouldn't just ignore everyone screaming for no reason. They were the ones ignoring what I was looking at. He asked me what I thought it was. I told him that at first I thought it was a beaver, and then I noticed it was the size of a man. His eyes lit up. He had an encounter with the creature near his house at Sleepy Hollow. He asked me if it was the Wolf Man, and I replied, more like the Gill Man. We decided to take an adventure and look for clues along the trail by the river. By that time, all of Alex's brothers were interested in the hunt. My sister joined along as well. They had all heard of the Wolf Man and stuck very close to us. We approached the bank where I'd spotted the creature. The entire area smelled like dead fish. There were weird slide marks in the mud, but nothing we could identify. Flies were buzzing violently as Michael called us over to a pit. There were hundreds of fish carcasses and bones everywhere. It was an eerie sight. We backed off slowly and heard a call from the river. It was some old fisherman. He pulled his little metal boat up to the bank and asked us what we were doing. I told him we were just hiking the trail and looking for worms. He asked, "What's that god-awful smell?" And before I could make an excuse, Mike led him up to the pit. The man was stunned, and he went right back to his boat. He told us to get home and keep quiet. Aaron asked him, "Keep quiet about what?" He scanned all of our faces and in a dead serious voice replied, "The river demon." We wandered back to the house and joined our parents around the fire. We did the exact opposite of what the fisherman told us to do and asked the adults about the water demon. They brushed it off and said that the old man was just trying to scare us. Then Mike said, "We found its den." Then Alex shouted, "And Connor saw it." My parents beamed at me. I thought it was a beaver, and the moms quickly replied, "Then it probably was." And then I continued saying, "It started to stand up out of the water." They quickly shushed me and said that I was seeing things due to my concussion. My sister was quick to point out that I had spotted the creature before my head was caved in. The parents made sure that we didn't leave their sight for the rest of the night. As the sun went down and the skies got darker, we heard the chorus of frogs and crickets raining through the river. Then the mute button got pressed, and the surrounding area went completely dead. The silence was deafening. The stillness came to a halt when we heard strange groans and splashing toward the pit. Mike said, "He's feasting," and I pictured the beast devouring large fish and disposing of their heads in that pile of flies. The adults ushered us inside, and the night came to an end shortly after. The next day, we returned to the Dreams Park for more baseball. After the tournament, the team went to Ostago Lake for our final team picnic. The story of the river demon came to the surface, and some locals overheard us talking about it. They came over to us and said that the creature we encountered was called the Susquehanna seal. Others named it the West Branch Dugong. I was relieved to hear that others had experienced this creature. They warned us that we were very lucky to have survived the encounter. After hearing about the Susquehanna seal, the blurry image of what I saw began to take shape in my mind. The creature I saw was long, slender, and grayish-black, like a dolphin. It seemed to be a blend of a marine animal and a hominid species. After watching Creature from the Black Lagoon, I felt that the animal that I had encountered was similar to the Gill Man. I am very lucky that I did not meet the same fate as the characters on that scientific journey. Chapter 7. Tennessee Titans. My friend's favorite team is the Tennessee Titans, but he doesn't believe in Bigfoot. That's like a Christian who doesn't believe in God. Okay, maybe not that far, but after you hike in the Smoky Mountains, if you still believe that we're the only ones out there, I'll buy you tickets for the next game. There have been mysterious disappearances and decades of first-hand encounters that paint a clear picture of why the baseball team got their name. I can assure you of that. There have been encounters in the Appalachian Mountains that go back to the day of the mound builders, but the Nephilim descendants have still been spotted to this day. The natives hunted alongside the friendly giant clans and competed with the territorial ones. They were referred to as Yahoo, Stonish Giants, and Raven Mockers. There are small species similar to Apom that have been reported as well. In Mary Green's book, 50 Years with Bigfoot, she documented an interesting relationship with the Carter family and a clan of Sasquatch on their Tennessee farm. Mary was a pioneer in the community and sadly was killed for digging too deep. I believe she was murdered because these secrets are detrimental to the web of control. One evening, the grandfather had found a baby Bigfoot that had been badly injured and pinned down by a fallen tree. He freed it and brought the little guy home to dress his wounds. Carter thought that he was a neighbor's deformed son and kept him in his home while asking around. After no answers and the boys trashing the inside of his home, he built him an outside stall and named him Fox. A few nights later, he heard a loud crack in the night, and he saw 2 adult Bigfoots breaking the wood and freeing the juvenile. Weeks later, he noticed that the child would follow him in the tree line while Roberts worked on the farm. The parents had migrated, and Fox had stayed at the farm. Over time, the two formed a rare bond that could have only happened how it happened. Carter spoke 6 Native American languages and was able to communicate with Fox. Every night after dinner, Grandpa would bring him food to the barn and work with Fox. Janice and Lila were the granddaughters of the Carter family. They both met with Mary Green on the property and explained everything that they knew about the family's relationship with these creatures. They explained that Fox grew up and met Sheba. Together, they had 10 children. The men would leave the territory to find a mate when they came of age, and the women took care of the young until a male Bigfoot came to mate when they matured. Robert and Fox introduced their families to each other over time. Sheba was hesitant around humans but never let go of a pink quilt they had gifted her. Janice held hands with Fox and his young children. They played together near a creek and ate mud pies. Over time, both groups grew to trust one another, but there were still some barriers between the two human species. She grew up with one named Blackie, but he had a feeling about him. He made lewd gestures towards her and he was very aggressive. Years later, he kidnapped a girl and abused her. A nearby farmer heard her screams and luckily saved her. The girl spent the rest of her life in an institution, scarred from the incident. Janice was sad to say that it could have been her or her baby sister. Another time, Sheba knocked Janice off her horse, but those were the only threatening times. Fox and Robert shared hunting and fishing techniques. The family would find dead animals up in trees, tower stacks of slate rocks along creeks, and limbs in teepee formations. Janice learned some of Fox's language and wrote it in a notebook. Penna meant sugar, Paho was a word for smoke, and they called the sun Nanika. The cows were Postain, dogs were Hob, owls were Mope, and Knock meant friend. Gway meant now, and Geem meant love. Their friendship broke barriers known to most men. When Grandpa got older, Fox would visit him near the porch. He would sleep in the cellar when it would get cold. He broke open all the canned foods one winter when Robert didn't feed him. The family had plaster casts of Fox's daughter Nikki and her mate Bo. They often found scat and animal bones on the farm's property. Fox visited Robert often, and in his final days knew that he was near the end. They were best friends. Years later, when Janice and Lila came back to the property, they rarely saw Fox but could still feel that he was out there. When Mary Green was visiting the farm, an older gray Bigfoot was captured on camera, keeping a close eye on the group from the woodline. This was the last we heard of Fox. May this bond be forever remembered. This footage was broken down by Scott Carpenter, another Tennessee man with an interesting relationship with Bigfoot. Scott has written multiple books on Sasquatch, and he's even worked on DNA genome projects. He has captured countless encounters and faces on his hiking camera. He has had a Bigfoot follow him home for over 50 miles. They have left gifts and been spotted by his neighbors. Scott is Christian-based and believes that they are children of the Watchers. He has rebuked the Nephilim from his property, but they still follow him every time he hits the trail. Sadly, not everyone escapes unharmed. There have been many people who have vanished from the Appalachian Mountains, and in particular the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Rangers have been attacked and are well aware of other forces that lurk in these protected lands. In 1969, tragedy struck when a young boy vanished while camping during a Father's Day weekend that changed the Tennessee landscape forever. Dennis Martin was 6 years old when he disappeared at Spence Field in 1969. He was camping with his older brother and dad on June 14th. Another family, also named the Martins, arrived with 2 sons as well. The 4 boys were playing hide and seek and wanted to prank their parents. The boys were going to hide on each side of the trail and jump out and scare the adults. Dennis was wearing a bright red sweatshirt, so he was told to go to the other side of the trail. That was the last time Dennis was seen. Well, maybe. The Key family was nearby at Rowan's Creek searching for bears when they were startled by something in the woods. They heard a ferocious shriek and saw a large, hairy being in the woods. They said it was an unkempt giant man. The Keys also mentioned that the creature had something flung over its shoulder, and that thing was red. The FBI quickly said the incident was not connected to the disappearance and swept it under the rug. Mr. Martin was furious when he later found out about the encounter from the newspaper. He made the hike himself and proved that the trek was clearly possible. When the record-breaking search party arrived, so did the storms. There were torrential downpours for the next 3 days that wiped away any evidence that could have possibly been found. The search and rescue workers then witnessed the Green Berets arrive. The park was emptied while the jungle fighters arrived for their mission. Dennis Martin's body was never found. A footprint of a shoe similar to Denny's was located but ultimately led to nothing. A ginseng hunter claimed to find a boy's skull but waited 20 years to report it due to the fear of being arrested for illegal activity. No more leads were ever officially documented, but many locals claim to know what happened to the boy. The locals know that Dennis wasn't the only one. Many children have been taken from the Smokies, and many local families had no choice but to fight back. Other hunting groups were employed to take care of the problem. Elite marksmen and trackers were hired to exterminate the wild people. This is what the Green Berets had been brought in to do. The creatures had broken the treaty, and it was time for them to pay. Sadly, there have been bad things done by both sides, and many innocent lives were lost. The FBI official who was overseeing the Dennis Martin case ended up committing suicide shortly after the search was called off. Many say that he could not live with himself after he saw what the Green Berets pulled out of the forest. The soldiers killed many women and children and Sasquatches that were sadly collateral damage in this horrible situation. I truly wish there were more stories like the Carter family and less missing 411 cases around the world. In January 2013, Bert and I were driving from Cleveland down to Orlando to do video work for the USFTL, National Flag Football Championships. It was over 1,000 miles and 16 hours of road time at best. We left in the evening and heard warnings of a bad snowstorm in the mountains. We took the turnpike, 77 South, and it was known to be dangerous even in the best of conditions. We kept an eye out for deer while talking for hours. Time flew by. My radio suddenly turned on, and we laughed that we had been talking nonstop for a good 6 hours without it. We relaxed to some good music while going the speed limit. The snow was thick, and each turn had a cliffside of thousands of feet. We were definitely ready for the Florida sunshine. This was our escape every January from the cold. After a while zoning out, focused on the road, in southwest Virginia near the Tennessee border, we both jolted up, pointing, saying, "Did you see that?" We had both seen the same thing. A giant figure stepping down a bank from a very large tree on the right side of the road. It disappeared into the darkness as we approached it with our headlights. I slowed down to take a look back, but we both knew that we couldn't get very far in the snow, and it wouldn't be very safe for the other cars that were approaching. The adrenaline sure woke us up, but we both knew it was time to get off the road. There wasn't a rest stop for many miles, so we had to find the first place that we could stop for the night. We were both dozing off, and luckily I found a pull-off where several semi-trucks had set up for overnight. We pulled up between them, shut the car off, and bundled up. Before we fell asleep, we joked about what we had seen. It was either a giant, a Bigfoot, or a walking tree. We laughed, but I was nervous about sleeping so close to the woodline. Bird was more worried about the cold. He reminded me of the stories that he had told me growing up about the Wolfman. I fell asleep and woke up with my teeth chattering. I luckily got the car started up and was back on the road. A few hours later, there was sunshine and swampland. Years later, I still have dreams and visions about that snowy night in the Appalachian Mountains. Chapter 8. Florida Skunk Ape. Many people think Florida is just Disney castles and spring break beaches, but most of the state is farms, swamplands, and trailer parks. While Florida man stays in the spotlight, Skunk Ape enjoys creeping in the shadows. The Swamp Thing has been spotted on saltwater coast and deep in the bayous since the Seminole days. But when a woman photographed a large one eating apples in her backyard in Mayaca, the state woke up. From the Everglades to Ocala, you must watch out for snakes, gators, and jaguar. But most of all, the skunk ape. Many people believe the monster gets its name from the god-awful smell that lingers with every big step. But that's not the only route. In the late 1940s in the northern panhandle, there was a large Sasquatch that had a white stripe down his head and back, like a skunk. The local people who encountered the wild man coined the skunk ape, but the others called them stump jumpers, swamp things, cabbage men, mango people, and many other names in those moments when their world was being turned upside down and shook out. After about 8 months that I was living in Lakeland, my mom moved down to the Panhandle. It was about 5.5 hours away, and I would make the drive quite often. I'd drive by the Jeepers Creepers location in Ocala, see the Gators in Gainesville, and the Knolls in Tally. But I always feared driving through the Green Swamp. Near Colt Creek State Park, you lose cell reception and you're at least 50 miles from any help. I left Calhoun County around 10 so I could drive through the night and miss all the crazy Florida traffic. I crossed the time zone and looked over to the Apalachicola River Bridge, admiring the swamps below, and was off again to the Biltmore in Lakeland. A few hours later, I passed Lake City and was heading south towards oblivion. I texted my mom when I was near Colt Creek before turning my busted phone on airplane mode and entering the Green Swamp. I turned my bright lights on and kept my eyes open for deer, cops, and debris in the road. I heard stories of killer hitchhikers, giant panthers, and of course, stories of the Swamp Thing. The creek was known for haunted abandoned homesteads, large gators, and old Indian tales of the supernatural. I was limited on gas, so I set cruise control, I sparked up a joint, and then suddenly saw something ahead. I locked my doors and turned my music off. I saw a figure in the middle of the road. The shadow was waving their arms, and I had to give my eyes a rub. A car was pulled off on the side. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was being set up. It was a woman, and she looked like she needed help. I pulled off to the side of the road, and she came running to my car. She said that her tire popped, and she couldn't get her spare on. I was relieved and said I could help. She stopped me and said that she knew how, but she couldn't. I said that maybe my equipment would work, and I popped my trunk. She slammed my trunk down and said, "No, I can't, 'cause something's out there," while pointing towards the woods. I asked her if it was a man, bear, or what. She said it was a werewolf. She said it growled at her. I figured it was just an angry panther, and I popped my trunk again. I gave her a flashlight and told her to give me some light, and she kept shining it towards the woods. Maybe it was a rabid yodi. After a few minutes, I had the car jacked up and the tire just about off when I heard something shuffling in the tree line. I didn't pay much attention to it until my workplace went completely dark. She was frozen in fear and shining the light towards the noise. When I finally looked up towards her eyes' gaze, I was deeply startled. I saw a large shadow figure just beyond the tree line. The bog man was fascinated by the pretty woman. I dropped the tools and the monster finally broke his stare. He turned his head slightly towards me and was unhappy that I was disrupting his night with his Andero. Seconds felt like hours. I was hit by waves of energy that I couldn't even understand. He let out a ferocious roar and then took off into the thicket. We could hear him breaking branches and shaking the ground, still screaming. It felt like all the air from the area left with him. I gasped for breath. Without hesitation, she ran towards my car and demanded we go. She stopped in the back and was silent for a while. After a few minutes of confusion, she asked, "Where's your passenger seat?" And we both busted out laughing. She said, "I told you it wasn't a panther." I said, "That was no werewolf either. That was a Sasquatch." She yelled, "The skunk ape?" We made it to town and pulled into a gas station. I was filling up when a sheriff pulled in behind me. The woman ran over to him and told her story. He approached me and I was a little bit nervous. He thanked me and said that I may have saved her life out there. There had been many sightings in that stretch, and some of the encounters were quite aggressive. The pretty woman ran over and gave me a hug. She said that the sheriff would drive her back to her car, and she was very thankful that I'd showed up. She offered me money for my lost tools, but I wasn't worried about it. I told her good luck on her journey and was back off into the night. I was glad I pulled over and didn't just keep driving. I didn't need that on my conscience.